Today, our focus is performance transformation based on effective learning strategy, how to define success and how to measure it. And this all means aligning your learning strategy to the people and to the business expectations. My name's Carol Cohen, and I have the privilege of leading both the strategy and the sales training practices here at InfoPro. Thank you for joining session 4 of our series on building a learning strategy. In this session, I'll be focusing on setting success criteria and measuring progress. Why performance transformation? Why not training or learning? We can say it in other ways. Knowing versus applying, memorizing versus internalizing, finding versus aligning, recalling versus doing, all based on a solid learning strategy. And what's the key? Context. For the learner, it's those aha moments where you figure out where to put and how to use what you just learned. And when you were in 7th grade, invariably somebody sitting in your class asked the teacher, "Why do we have to learn algebra? We're going to never use this." That was because your math book sat there by itself, unconnected to real life. The bell would ring and you'd change the subject. So that means, what do learners need to do, to say, to show, to remember, to find? It's all about measuring success based on performance. So what are we talking about really? Most of us know Elliot Macy. He's one of those thought leaders in learning who's made it his business to be on the forefront of topics we like to get excited about. I attended one of Elliot Macy's sessions up at Saratoga. He has a think tank up there. And he did a little session on how the brain is a computer with file systems and folders. And you have to provide the map to the file system where the training fits in order for it to stick in the brain. I believe it was something Macy had been thinking about and he just wanted to share it. It all came back to me in considering this topic today. Recently, I've been obsessed with The Flash. During an episode in season 3, he explained how his teachers were effective with him. He said, "Teaching is a lot more than just doing something and expecting people to follow. It's about ensuring and empowering people to use their gifts to succeed on their own." That's the context. How will the people use what we teach and remember what they need to remember in order to change their behavior and therefore transform their performance? So let's put the words into a context for a minute. Look at this poor guy, Roy. He works in a call center. He gets training all the time. His manager listens to his calls and stands behind him tapping his foot. He's evaluated on a customer survey question. Would you hire this rep? Yes or no? So let's talk about how we can look at him with an eye for performance transformation. Or do we just tell him what we're going to tell him, and tell him again? And then have his manager listen to his call and then tell him one more time? Call centers have a million ways to count stuff. But would it be better to look at it as a performance transformation and really analyze what the success metrics for him should be and how we can train him to meet or exceed them? It really is about performance. So let's make it even more real. Wouldn't you rather have this smiling, happy, confident Roy answer your next support call? Or do you want the one who clicked through all the e-learning so he got full credit? Or the one who has practiced and applied the learning to real-life situations? Now here's the thing. If you think about those supposed soft skills, they can really be broken down into observable behaviors and knowledge that can be measured. I can think of one such example: trust. Building a high trust environment, really something important for just about everyone to succeed at anything, like doctors or consultants or salespeople or managers or Roy. But what is trust really? Well, it's mostly character and competence. And the character breaks down into intent, and honesty. Honesty is pretty easy to teach. Just tell the truth, even in difficult conversations. Intent is also easy to teach. Just usually, having the right intent means that you want to say, help others succeed. My intent, my personal intent, is to empower the success of others or enable the success of others. Have that intent for yourself and recognize intent for others. So, listening for the intent of others and responding with empathy. Now, I didn't say it was easy, I actually said it was hard, but it's certainly not soft and fluffy, and it can be measured. And look at how happy it makes Roy. We need to think about those concepts as we align to Roy's performance goals and his context. And how do we measure success? How do we craft the promise to our stakeholders and clients that we will meet or exceed these metrics? It really is a promise. So, how do we do it? We create what we refer to as a success plan, an organic document that travels from the learning strategy, the inception of the idea for the project, all the way through and past the completion or delivery of the project. And it forms the basis of evaluation for us. So, we've discussed the approach and the 4 categories of evaluation in previous sessions, but the critical success factor for this whole thing is what I call the trust points. And these are the 6 content criteria located on the y-axis or the left side of the table. And you remember that the x-axis represents the 4 areas of evaluation made famous by our friend Mr. Kirkpatrick. These are the elements we examine to both make the promise and then measure the success. And the power of this is our ability to easily personalize it so the client feels that they actually own their own success. Now, let me say that again. We capture their information, their current state, their method of tracking results, and we compile it into a promise that they recognize and want. It's pretty cool. And you can see why it's also organic. We tweak it as we go along. We show them where they have gaps that we can explore. We begin immediately by capturing and validating with them what we already know. And often our perspective can be completed or drafted for the proposal stage before we even begin the strategy exercise. We can identify some possible outcomes if you know them. As we progress in the project, we examine further the current state. Asking what they measure now gets you closer to identifying what you want to include for measurement. Now, one caveat: not all clients are ready or even willing to get deep into the business results. So we go as far as we can. They know our approach, they consider the strategist an expert in this, and you can guide them. The risks and milestones are about you. The risks are specific to the success plan and not the risks for the whole project or even an individual lesson. One risk might be that they're not currently measuring the current state at all, and therefore we're all in uncharted waters in that particular metric. And then the milestones are the checkpoints for returning to assess the progress, usually like 60, 90, 120 days. Here's the first rule for just about everything in the world, but in particular, the first rule of this: begin with the end in mind. I'll tell you, I've been on the other side of projects on this, hiring the very expensive vendors, and I'll tell you, number 1, nobody is taking this approach. And number 2, nobody even thinks of this until after the project's over. Oh, they'll come back with their high-priced consultants and say, okay, now I'm going to need about 25 people to interview. And at that point, it falls flat. But I say, begin with the end in mind. Talk about measuring success right up front. That will differentiate yourself from everybody else. Notice, I have put number 4 in the first position. Begin with the end in mind means focus on evaluation level 4 and level 3 first every time. Make this your call to action. As you begin your learning strategy, remember It is about the people, the learners. The whole process should be very personal. Focus on the person. Develop a learner persona that focuses on the way the person approaches their work and their learning. Don't generalize and don't guess. Base the persona on the information gathered from observations and interviews. Put the learning in context. This will differentiate you from those who are content-driven. So often, a learning strategy is actually a content communication strategy. Your learning strategy should explore the context of the learner and flesh out the details aligned to the goals, which brings us to the third call to action. Set metrics for success. Begin with the metrics they already measure and expand to include outcomes that support the business and behavior change. Always ask them what they want their people to do, to say, to show, to find differently than they do now. If you want to talk about this, I'm always available. Just let me know, and I would be happy to set up a call. Be sure to watch session 5, which is focused on implementing and the strategy. See you next time.